Actualidad, espectáculos, negocios, deportes, todo en TV Radio Miami, la nueva televisión.
In the November election. Today we have here a number of residents as well as city officials that I will introduce. First, my name is Norberto Espangaro and I'm a director of the Doral City Coalition. With us, representing the city, we have Eddie Rojas, our city manager, Barbie Hernandez, the director of parks. We have Matilde Menendez, the finance director, and we also have your name, Sergio Masvidal, who is the managing director of the consultant company who is working with the city on the bond. Right. On the resident side, we have Brady Nader, who is a very well-known resident to all of you. We have Amanda Sherlock, who is another resident. We have Fernando Rutiner, who is also is a member of the board of parks and kids and parks. Kids Police Parks, right? He's also a member of a group that works with Susie Castillo on the minority representation in contracts in the school board. First, as an introduction, we're going to see a video that the city have put together on this important project. Well, this video represents the most important project within the context of this referendum that also includes other elements that will be discussed in our Q&A session. I will ask Mr. Manager,
yes.
Eddie Weltenfer, thank you very much for your time. I know you have been working a lot on this, making presentations
Absolutely.
almost every day.
Thank you.
But we'll appreciate if you got a 5-minute summary of how you come to this day and this November.
So thank you for the Doral Coalition for having us here. I think this is a great opportunity for us to go ahead and do what we're trying to do, which is an educational campaign to educate the community, to provide them the information they need to be able to make the best decision that they can make possible on November 6th when this referendum is coming to fruition. As you can see in the video, it only shows a small portion of the things that we're trying to work on. It's a very ambitious project that the city has undertaken. It's one of the most ambitious projects that we've had probably and the most important decisions that we had to make probably since the incorporation of the city. We're talking about a $150 million bond that is going to go towards building out the parks system, and it really deals with more than just parks, but it's really the future of the city and the quality of life of the city. It deals with public safety, it deals with quality of life, it deals with transportation and alternatives to transportation, which you'll see when we start to talk a little bit about the bike trails and the bike system that we're trying to develop as part of this. It talks about public safety with the lighting, and it touches a lot of things that are all strategic goals of the city. We have here today our Parks Director Barbie Hernandez, who's instrumental in leading this charge. She'll be able to talk to you a little bit about how we came to this conclusion. This is something that is not an arbitrary decision that was made by the city. It was something that was very calculated. It's something that is timely. We have here with us also Maddie, who's our finance director, who's going to talk a little bit about finances, and we have the consultant, one of the consultants that we have that's helping us to make these decisions that we feel are the appropriate decisions for the city at this time right now. Like I said, it's a very ambitious project. We're here to educate we're not advocating, but we're educating the community to make the very best decision that they can possible. So that's what we're trying to do.
We have been not only doing our own research, but we have also attended many of the events you have been conducting in the city. So somehow we have put together the questions that have been asked either in our talks to the people as well as in the meetings you had. So we're going to go around and do no presentations, but just asking you the questions that everybody wants to know. And I'm sure you have all the answers. I will start with Amanda.
Thank you. So I'm very interested in the aquatics facility. I feel it's something that Doral has been missing. And I've been to some of the workshops you've had over the last few years to understand what may or may not be included. What is your vision now of what will be included in the aquatics facility? And I think second part to that question is there was talk at one point about trying to attract competitive teams during winter to generate more revenue, as well as diving teams. What pieces of the aquatics facility are still included?
So, and if you don't mind, I'll
No, absolutely. I mean, just before we start, I mean, this project and the aquatics facility and all the projects that we will be talking about come from a lot of research, a lot of community outreach. It's part of our master planning. It's taken into consideration the inventory that we have in place right now. It's taken, surveys. There's a lot of technical information that has come to fruition to make these decisions that we've made. And Barbie was one of the ones that kind of led the charge in that, so I'll give the floor, concede the floor to her.
And as Amanda, I know that you've attended a lot of our aquatic workshops back in 2015 when we started the process for the research on the aquatic facility. So to answer your question on what amenities are included, a competitive pool, which is 25 meter to 50 meter. We have a lap pool, which is a learn to swim, water aerobics for senior citizens, and learn to swim goes from like infant all the way to whatever age. We also have an indoor facility where there's going to be a training component. So a lot of the swimmers, what we learned in our research is that before they go and swim, they need some type of workout before they go into the water, and even after the fact. Along with that, lifeguard rooms, concessions, and then on the other side of that, there's more of a recreation leisure side where there's a small lazy river, a water tot lot, umbrellas, rental areas for the families, slides. Along with that, there is like a little splash pad also so we looked at all the ages basically to make sure that we covered all the ages and all the abilities as well. So the aquatic facility basically meets the needs of infant all the way to 101, and also for special needs, because we also have a Special Olympics that they also will be part of this as well, and there will be the aquatic part of it. The competitive pool has the bleachers with shade on it. We're also looking into a shade over the pool because people's concerns were also the sun and that's something that they were concerned about, being too long in the pool. So that's basically the components of it. There'll be a ticketing stand, an office, storage, the basic stuff for an aquatic facility. So those are the amenities
Okay,
that are included right now. And that's on the concept, it's on the website.
great.
And if I can just add to that, I mean, the idea of the aquatic facility was something that it was a balance
Mhm.
of competitive, needs and also recreational needs, and where the recreational needs are proportionate to the competitive needs to be able to subsidize
Mhm.
and balance the costs of this thing moving into the future. So it makes it more sustainable. So all of these things are things that went into the thought process of when we developed that one component in that bigger park setting.
Right, we did research that. There was, the lap pools and the recreation side, the recreation side does generate a little more revenue, that families do come in because it's the entire family coming in there. The rentals of the umbrellas for parties is a big revenue generator.
Great.
So, yeah, that's a good point.
Ready?
Awesome. Thank you. So actually, definitely thank you, and thank you to the rest of the staff that's worked on this. I know this has been a project for a long time that's gone under a lot of thought and development. So one of the questions I've been seeing online is really, we understand the cost that it's going to most likely take to build this, right? So now we have the buildings, we have the beautiful park. What are we going to be able to do to offset the recurring costs? Because there's maintenance of a pool, there's maintenance of equipment, there's things that will need to get replaced over time. Obviously wear and tear, right? What are your thoughts, and what has been the plan and the discussions for the city to sustain this long term?
So and I'll talk in broad strokes, and I'll let the experts talk in more
Sure.
detail. So there is going to be some kind of subsidy that comes from our general operating and maintenance costs, that from the revenues that we take as a city, and we factor that into the overall kind of budget that we use to provide the services that we do to the community. But what we're doing in this case, and specific to this, to make this project and these projects more sustainable, is that we're looking to get creative in how we program, what type of programs we bring, what kind of partnerships we develop with the community around us, how we can bring sponsorships as part of this. And with that, I'll go ahead and I'll let Barbie go ahead and talk a little bit more about that.
So some of the offset, so the park and all the parks are free. You walk in, it's a free to come into our facilities. What isn't is some of the programs. The aquatic facility will have a fee. So these are all just program fees and admission fees that we need to assess in order to generate revenue. That's one of the ways to offset. The other way we're looking at, as the manager stated, are these partnerships. For example, at Legacy Park, we have a partnership with Baptist, where Baptist has sponsored the gym, and they're providing $15,000 a year right now to have their name on the gym. That's a way of generating revenue. That's what we're going to be looking at for Legacy Park and other areas such as the trails. We can be going after Perry Ellis, Carnival, Jackson's another one that has shown interest in partnering up with us. So that would be a way of generating revenue. The other way is grants. We're also looking into grants for some of these programs. For example, a senior lunch. The seniors have wanted lunches, free lunches, and there is a program for this. So another facility will provide a sort of like a cafeteria area for the seniors to come and have lunch, and it will be for free. It won't be coming out of our operations through a grant program. And obviously that has a lot of work to do with it too, but those are all ways of offsetting, along with other sponsorships as well. So those are ways that we're looking into to offset the cost of operation and maintenance.
Tax credits also are part of it, where you have health initiatives that you introduce into the programming. There are tax credits that you can get. So there's a lot of different ways we're exploring all the possibilities. We understand that, like I said at the beginning, this is a very ambitious project, and we have to be very creative about how we move forward to make these projects sustainable for the future. So we're definitely working on those things.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Excellent. One of the things, a comment before we go to Fernando, is that I was reading in several materials that have been produced by organizations to study the impact on parks, and I was really surprised to see how much they influence the health of the citizens,
Right.
how much they influence the education of the kids,
Right.
how much they influence the way adults and seniors use the park.
Right.
And that goes hand to hand to this kind of partnership that, of course, today they are embedded, I guess, in the projections, but at the end of the day, they will be worked out as it comes to fruition, the reality. And My understanding, Barbie, is that the analysis today says that at the time everything is running, and according to the plan, the incremental cost to the city will be around $2 million. Is that a correct assumption?
That's the net, so.
Net.
Yes. Around
Which
2,
means
2.5.
compared to a budget of around 70 million, to make it rough, it means that if, once you do the investment, of course, you gotta pay for the investment and the interest rate, the net incremental cost to the city expenses is about 3% or even
Right.
less than that.
Right.
And who knows in the evolution of the world how many other partnerships and business you can get in, because you generate business generates it, so it's a very positive circle you get into, right?
Right, absolutely.
That's
But just to add to that, you as you put your taxes to, and there's value that is not measurable, and that's the quality of life value. Where you have these world-class facilities in your backyard, and that you have access to these things, and how do you put a price on that? There's these commercials that say about you do these certain things, and these things are priceless, like moments that you have in life. And I think these are the things that we're talking about when we're considering what when we're subsidizing a certain portion of this. Now we work hard to, obviously, because at the end of the day you want to be as frugal as you can and as fiscally responsible as you can with the tax dollar. But at the end of the day, we're talking about quality of life on some of these things, and there's a benefit to that.
Before I go to, sorry, Fernando, but
No.
I was reading some of the research that was done in other cities in the United States, and cities especially in the north. One of them showed that there was a net saving estimated of $3 billion on 57 million people. $3 billion were saved on improving health expenses because
Absolutely.
of the parks.
Absolutely.
So this is kind of the cost that is in there. So but you don't measure by the tickets. You don't
Exactly,
measure that.
exactly. So there's a very subtle and very it's kind of like an intuitive kind of reaction to this thing, and it's not, you can't really measure it. So it's really, and there's where why we're here and why we're having this discussion is to for people to kind of measure that on their own and make that decision when they go on November 6th to go vote for or against this.
I think and I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I think we still got good time, but I think there's parts of this that if you start putting them all together, and I believe I read the same article you were talking about, or a few others, because I've looked at it. When you look at, first of all, we were rated what, 22?
21.
So just to your
21.
point, it was 22. Money Magazine rated the city of Doral recently, which we're all very proud of, and we should all be very proud of that we live here and us that we work in the city. 22 out of the top 50 cities in the country to live in. In the state of Florida, there was only one other city that was in that rating with us, which was Weston. And so, I guess that puts them, they were 21.
Yeah.
So they were number 1, we were number 2. And in Dade County, we were number 1. So, start to drill down on these things, and you start to see that, this is a great city to live in. We're in a great time, in a great moment in the history of the city. And I think that, this is the time to kind of to live the moment, and to make a decision that is going to influence the future of this city and the future of our park system specifically, if you want to talk about it.
Exactly. And then with that, so I'll just finish my train of thought. So with that, I know you said great, but if you look at this park, I think we're good now. This is going to really make us great, right?
Absolutely.
You look at just the fact that in other studies that they've done, even crime has gone down. So
Yes.
there's other benefits which are not directly correlated, but really help this. And you start looking at companies that want to come and invest in our city. So
Absolutely.
Amazon was like knocking on the door, right? We were in contention. And you start looking at that, and a company like Amazon starts coming, looking at our city. We're at 22. We have the opportunity to only move higher when we do something like this. What does that mean? I see it as increase in property values, right? Property values are supply and demand. So when you start having companies like Amazon looking to move in here, you start having major corporations move in here. Obviously, they bring employees who are going to want to live, play, and work in our city. This is a good way to say, okay, it's going to cost me this much per year, but how much more is my property going to increase?
Right.
And one last thing to summarize the way I feel about this project, I have 2 little kids, And I get tired of going to certain parks where we're done. We're there. My kids hit the 5-year-old mark. The park is done. There's no more we can do there. We've done the 5 things. This park is huge. There's a lot to do here.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do here from when you're 2 or 1 to when you're 99, you know? And I think that that's a great feature of this park, that you can keep using it for a long time.
But it's not just this one park.
That's right.
I mean, there's, you know, and I'm sure we'll, in this discussion, we'll talk a little bit about some of the projects, but there's a cultural facility.
Yes,
There's a lot of things. And I'll just to kind of build on what you were saying, you know, I until the other day, now that I'm a little bit older now, so I'm kind of getting out of that gray, what the median, the demographic was between 35 and 45 was the average median demographic in the city with 2 to 3 kids. I was in the dead center of that until just the other day. Now I'm going to be 50, so I'm out of the range, but I still have the 3 kids, and I still live in the city. And you know, I have my 6-year-old. He's somewhere around here. And you know, I have options, you know, even, and so what we're doing is what you said. We're going from being a good city to being a great city with a project such as this. It's something that there's a lot of things, a lot of intangibles that are not measurable that are the benefits for the city moving forward when you're talking about a project as ambitious as this.
Now, Fernando.
All right, Fernando.
So I appreciate that you went through that about the different parks, because I'm a big user of the many different parks that we have in Doral. So thank you for everything that you do, Barbie, you know, and then the whole team. The parks is great, and I'm also involved with the Scouts. So in Doral we have about 170 active Scouts right now, and you can't do Scout without getting out, you know. So sometimes we have to go out of Doral to find, you know, other places that we camp at, and these type of things are exciting, because maybe we can work out some other things for more use for the kids to get out there and enjoy the outdoors. But aside from that, it's the opportunity for not only the Scouts, but you know, the parents. We're all big kids at heart that we actually need to get out, and it's good for us,
Right.
to get out and enjoy nature. So with all this, you know, you hear a bunch of noise and information on the different chats we have in the city, but some of it comes down to people surmising their own information or assumptions as to what's going to be, how the money's going to be used. So one of my things was to find out how much we can drill down and have offered as far as detailed information for those that are interested in that type of things. I'm a banker by nature, so immediately what comes to mind are other questions aside from getting out there and enjoying. Then I look at some of the questions that come through, like we were saying, how are we going to sustain the costs, you know, going forward? So you address that. But some of the other things that people look at it and question, oh, well, 150 million, you know, and we understand that it's not going to be a full draw. I know you'll probably get into some of that, but some of the other breakdowns as to how much are we going to go into this park and the other park and the other side, and how much are today's dollars versus what's the total amount, because that 150 includes future money, you know, the future values of labor and materials and all these kind of things. So I think it would be good for those that are on the fence about making a decision to look at and have in front of them the full breakdown, like what I'm used to seeing as a credit manager at a bank would be, to look at the sources and uses of funds, and we can give it to people to make that uneasiness go away, to say this has been thought of, this is not just a number pulled out of the sky, and we can point to okay, this is how it's going to be used, and keep the finger on the fire on that. No, this is what we're expecting, and this is what we're voting for. So I think that would be an excellent exercise to give the voter a little bit more information as soon as possible on those type of deals, where we have issues of the bond, this particular issues of the bond being maybe looked at by a credit agency that you know, follow bonds. Because I know we were rated as a city and we have another issue out, but this one in particular, do we have all the specifics? I know it's a general obligation bond that we're looking at. But those are the details as to how the mechanics will work about it so that the voter looks and says, okay, now I understand it's going to be drawn up and it might only be 110 million when we're all said and done. So we know how that could possibly happen. And we talk about how others that may be coming in to the city's role of ownership of properties might be contributing and lowering the repayment horizon for that. So all those kind of things, I think, would give the voter a little bit better idea. So my comments were more like, as soon as we can get that out there, some of this idea that some people are coming up with their own answers would help.
Per assumption.
I have some specific questions that
Yeah,
address
we're
that.
gonna ask
Maybe
the-
we go on that.
So if you'd allow me, I'll give you a little groundwork just so you can, I'll set the context, and then I'll definitely turn over to the experts in finance and to our consultant who's here to talk about more specific questions, because you talked about a broad range of things. So this project and the projects that have been outlined or contained within this bond have come from, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of process. There was a lot of process that led up to these things. And one of the things that we do have very clear is what we are going to be spending this money on. And so we came up with a number based on estimates that are projections. Take into consideration the time it's going to take to execute these projects, the costs of construction, today versus in the next, whatever those projections are. We're looking 5 to 7, maybe 10 years tops to build out everything that we're looking to build out. We're looking to take draws from this from the bond in increments of 50 million over a course of 6 years as we need it. Obviously, as we start to dig into the real numbers and taking, negotiating contracts and looking at what this, we may not need 150 million, and if we don't need it, we're not going to use it. And the money is only going to be spent on the construction of these projects. It's not going to go to anything other than that. And for that, we have oversight components built into this thing that are part of the referendum. So you're going to have oversight committee. We're going to have, it's a very transparent process. So, some of the numbers that we talk about and that we've had on the website are really broad and really kind of worst case scenarios. As we've been gathering information from the questions that we've been getting as we've been going on this educational kind of pilgrimage that we've been going through, we've been able to kind of start to introduce additional information that we'll go into that will be able to answer some of those questions about, how this bond is going to materialize as we grow as a city. Because right now, we look at, some of the initial numbers that we looked at it with no growth, with only the residents that are here now contributing and bearing the burden of this. But the reality is, and everybody can look outside their windows and see cranes and construction trucks and all the things that are going on in the growth of the city that are going to help alleviate some of the burden from us that are here now. And myself and Barbie, who's a resident, and myself, who's a resident, that the things that we're gonna, that are a burden right now because of the growth of the city, and it's gonna dilute that somewhat. So the projects are very clear what we're going to be spending them on. So it's not like we're going to be,
And if I can add on to that, so give you an example, and this is just a construction cost, what they're going to go into as far as the payment as you go, because you were very general, and I think you spoke about construction costs. You also spoke about paying the bond back, from what I understood from the conversation. So to give you an example, when we did the analysis on Doral Central Park, today, if we were to build this concept, it would cost us $90 million. What we did with a cost estimator, and he looked at numbers, and he added 3.5% increase every year. Our prediction, when we put the shovels in the ground after permitting and design, it is at $120 million. So that's what we did, so that you can see, and obviously, as Eddie, as our city manager stated, we would obviously go out to bid, and when these bids come back, there is a negotiation. So it may be less than $120 million when we get down to it, and it all depends also on the trades and stuff like that. But the cost estimator did already add in the percentage of the increase due to construction costs going up at 3.5%. So that way you can see that that was there, that is available as well. We can put that out. We don't have any issues. It's spreadsheets and spreadsheets of trades that go down and specifically go into that. It talks about even the project team, what project team, the consultants, all of that is already, all soft cost is also added in there as well, which was something important. When we did the research before going out, we wanted to make sure that what the funds were precise in regards to, obviously we're not perfect, but they did account for soft costs, for the increase in construction costs, for the project consultants, for design, and for permitting. So those things are incorporated in there as well. So that way we can provide that information.
It's a very conservative estimate of these things.
There is, the way I see it is, whenever you open a new business, you make projections that are in the ballpark. In
Right.
my experience, I tell you, sometimes with experience, you can do that budget without even the details, because you know more or less what is the
Right.
cost per square feet and everything else. So the fact is that this is a catch-22, because if you don't get the bond, you cannot move.
Right.
And the bond, in my view, is like a line of credit. It's like we're going to buy a new house. We need the bank to tell us, well, we are credit worthy. Then you will see the house and everything else. But I cannot go and buy a house if I don't know that I have my credit,
Backed up.
available to the purchase. There is a lot of work that I think this is actually the easiest part.
Right.
And that goes to two questions that people have been asking as we saw in the social media. One is, you cannot use this money for anything else.
Right.
It would be illegal.
Right, exactly.
You will go to
You
jail.
cannot use it for anything
It would
that's
be-
not capital. Can't use it for operating expenses.
Okay,
You
and that's part of the
Only parks
bond.
projects. By state statute, it can only be used for parks projects because that's what's defined in the ballot
Okay.
language.
But
Perfect.
particularly not just parks project, the way I understand it, it has to be as defined in the bond
In the
issue.
wording.
In the bond, in the wording of the bond, exactly.
The wording
Exactly.
of
The ballot
the bond,
language.
so it's
In
not
the
just,
ballot.
That's what Sergio
they're all
stated.
parks in general, it's,
Exactly. You cannot get
Correct.
part of that money and buy a new piece of land to build another
No.
park. Good.
No.
That's one. Secondly is, this is like a line of credit, so it will be withdrawn throughout a period of time. Is there any commitment fee or anything like that
Well,
there?
there are various ways to financing. So a general obligation bond, in general, a bond is very, think of it as your mortgage on your home. I think you said that earlier. That's the best way to think about it. There's no way to accelerate this project. In order to build, $100 or $120 million worth of parks, using pay-go funds on an annual basis would require a very large millage impact, or several years, probably decades, to build the scale of parks you're talking today.
Right.
So really, you think of it as a mortgage. And there are different mechanisms we can look at when we get kind of more specific into the plan of finance. We're very early stage right now. After the ballot language, if it's approved on November 6th, we would go to the city council numerous times for approval on bond documents, plan of finance. So there'll be a lot more discussion at that point as well. I think just in general, the way it's been phrased now, 150 million, borrowing that, the tax calculator, it's on the website, that assumes borrowing the entire 150 million upfront. More than likely, and we do this all over the country, all over the state, we've done, I think 4 or 5 general obligation bond referendums in the last 5 years here in South Florida. More than likely, how this will work out is, depending on the construction pace and the expenditure schedule, you would issue one bond for, say, 50 million at the outset. As you spend that money down, 2, 3, 4 years later, you would issue the second tranche of bonds, spend that money down, and so on and so forth.
But that is underwritten by, you're gonna have an underwriter,
Correct. It would be an
so the
underwriter.
money is secure there. The
Yes.
interest rate will be fixed at the
It would
time of
be a
each
fixed
issuance.
interest rate, yes, at the time of each issuance.
So, and eventually we can hedge those interest rates with some futures and things like that, eventually, if you want to.
Yes, without getting into specifics on the plan of finance, that's that's always a possibility.
And now goes to the other financial, we are in the banking side here, so,
We're on the fun
you
side.
put a calculator, and my understanding is that in a median home, by the time we withdraw, I mean, we are now in the 50th year, they have done a great job, we just borrowed 150 and we finished the project. What would be the charge to the home of any value? Give us that amount.
Well, it's
This is the worst case scenario, considering what Barbie said, that includes incremental cost and everything else.
if the bond was issued at 4%, it would be $127, the annual.
For a home
For
that's.
a home that's $193,000 in
That's
tax
assessed
assessed
value.
value.
That's a medium
That's a
number.
medium.
And
Right.
that, and my understanding reading that is that there will be in the tax bill, there will be a separate line. So
separate
this
line.
will not be mixed up with any of the ongoing millage rate or operating expense and everything else. Will be
Correct,
designed
it's a
there.
separate one.
You almost have it like a separate account.
It is separate, it is separate. And another thing that we need to talk about is that really it'll be repaid by both commercial and residential owners. So it's not solely,
It's
you
not
know,
just residential.
it's
It's
not
not
just
just
residential, it's gonna
It's
be
commercial and
also,
residential.
right, funded from our commercial owners as well.
And that's 127 per year.
Per
So like
year, the
$200 a week,
And
That's-
as
about
as
$10
Barry
a
was
month.
saying,
$10 a month.
that
Okay.
millage rate is based on current value. So if the city keeps growing at the current rate, is that the way you analyze the bond? You're not, or you're making projections of
No,
growth?
you're absolutely right. That the number that was just cited is based on the value of the city today, with no growth assumptions into the future. As the city grows, presumably, there's additional taxpayers that come on board, and that value goes down a little bit.
You know, we've
So-
done some projections moving forward on just residential properties, and we're still working on some on commercial properties based on what we understand are properties that have been approved and have entitlements to build. And we're looking at just in residential alone, $3 billion or plus on in the next 5 years. Provided that there's no major crash or some kind of major catastrophe in the economy, but projects that have already been scheduled, that have already been approved, that are already moving forward, the phases have developed. So we know that it's better than the worst case scenario that have been projected, in the
I mean,
initial,
we're estimating, 80,000 residents by 2020. I'm looking at the current timeline, which is the timeline with the bond,
right,
right? And it looks like we're estimating an estimated time of completion of 2025.
Right.
So my understanding, and there's been a little bit of confusion, is let's say the bond, let's say the scenario is residents for whatever reason say no to this, right?
Right.
Is this park still gonna happen?
Look, I'll tell you honestly, it won't happen. It won't happen because look, so in 2014, right around when I became a manager, we had about $77 million in reserve in our reserve fund. It took 12, 13 years to build that. In the last 4.5 years, we've invested $107 million in development projects. 23 million in Legacy Park. We have another 13 million in Glades Park, plus all the road projects and the canal stabilization projects and capital building projects like the police facilities, the police substation. So we it took that long to build that. We're talking about 12, 13 years of trying to build that. I think that and then given the fact that what is construction going to cost in the future, given the environment that we're in right now, where it's a little volatile, where things with tariffs and things like that the cost of construction and materials go up, it'll be very difficult to execute a project such as what we're proposing now. In any of our anytime
We
recently.
attended some meetings where some citizens, I guess very poorly informed, said that you can build this with the current and existing money.
No.
My estimate is that you produce about $2 million in reserves every year, so it will take about 50 years to build it. So you can tell your children that when they have the grandchildren, they will start building the park, that's my estimate.
Exactly.
But you did use reserve to the legacy, right?
We did.
How much was legacy?
Legacy Park was about 23 million. Just in construction, I mean, there was
Right.
costs that were involved in purchasing the land, and plus other revenue sources that came in for the land that they're not included. But just the construction costs of that alone was $23+ million.
But you use the reserves.
We used reserves. I mean, that was part of that. When we were in this major building undertaking that was reinvesting in the community, the money that we had built up over the reserves over a period of 13 years. I mean, and that park is 18 acres. We're talking about 80 acres just for Central Park alone, plus the cultural facility, plus all the other projects that are involved in this. That I know we keep focusing on Central Park, but there's other projects that are involved in this, and so it would be a tremendous
But
burden.
you have today
Currently, approximately $39 million.
you got
in
40 million
reserves.
in reserve. The other question, I think I know the answer, but the other question that came out by many people is, why to use those reserves and don't get $150 million bond, get $100 million bond?
Well, we're required to maintain at least a 15% of our budget in reserve, so that's roughly 10 million. That would leave like 20 million in reserves, and I don't think it would be prudent to bring it that low. I mean, we have to have funds available in case there isn't a major storm. I think that's
How
the
many
important
other,
thing.
and look-
because you invested, how much you invested in the drainage system?
Okay, so just to what she was saying. So you know, you have a major event like Irma, which wasn't a major event, but it did knock down a lot of trees. We spent almost $2 million, and there's cities right now who had to borrow money to be able to take care of something like that. We were able to in 30 days be up and running, like if nothing ever happened here. Because why? Because we had a reserve that was healthy to be able to contend with these things in the future. And our reserves really moving forward, as we grow until we don't stabilize. Because right now we are, you know, we're still kind of climbing, and you still have people coming in, like you mentioned. You know, we're going to have in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll have 80,000 people in this city, and we have to provide services for these people that are just the ongoing stuff that we have to do. Our responsibilities as a municipal government, public safety and policing, and all the projects for the maintenance of our roads and everything else that we invest in and that we put back into the community as services that we give. That is what we have that reserve for, in case we have some shortfallings.
So-
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so you brought up a great point, which is we have residents that will be coming into the city, which is inevitable.
Right.
Just the other day, someone, I don't know if it was the Business Journal, put something out there, which is like, these are the projects that Doral is expecting to have happen, which are on their way. Okay?
Right.
So that's land, those are apartments, houses, whatever it is. We're going to have residents coming in. Do we have, I know we have Glades Park coming up,
Right.
which is going to be like a nature kind of
Yes.
park.
Right.
Do we have plans for another smaller park to accommodate these additional residents?
So I'll tell you, and I'll let Barbie kind of elaborate on it. But we have other things that we've done. We've gotten creative, like even just outside of here at our police training facility area, we've partnered up with MAU where we've bought pocket parks. I'm working on, as a city, we're working on purchasing land to be able to have future sites for future parks. You know, so we're trying to bring things forward. We have in downtown Doral South, we have 3 acres of land that are going to be dedicated to a public park. You know, the funding hasn't been identified. The land is there. The funding is not there yet, but we're looking to see how we can partner up with the developers to kind of share the burden so that the taxpayers don't have to. But these are all things that we are working on. But it's sparse. It's not like saying, okay, it's not a commitment that we can count on, that we're saying, hey, we're going to go forward and we're going to build this. You know, that's something completely different. That's a different conversation altogether.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what I was trying to say is ultimately envision the current parks we have now and just add another 20% of residents to that infrastructure.
Yeah. So
And they're already well used, let's say, right?
right.
So I think this is a great place to say this is going to be built to accommodate these additional residents coming into the city.
And then you
And
can
that's-
talk about level of service and things
Well,
like
that's
that.
we've constantly been playing catch up
Yeah.
since
Yes.
even I actually make 13 years with the city now. Come up November, and since I got here, it's been catch up. It's been, well, we first had 25,000 residents, then all of a sudden we had 35,000, then we went to 40. We're at 68,000 residents right now. And it's like, oh, we have to hurry up and build this park because there's so many other people here, because Morgan Levy was overpopulated. People are fighting for parking spaces. Legacy Park is starting to have that same issue currently right now. Glades Park, we're playing catch up still. We're still not at the level of service that, as the manager just stated, we're supposed to be, according to our comprehensive plan, 4.25 acres per 1,000 residents. We are currently 2.03 acres per 1,000 residents. So
Almost half.
we're under.
And these are things that, you know, I mean, our comprehensive plan are something that we strive to try to do to be a better community, to be that model community. It doesn't say that we are underserviced necessarily, but underserviced by the standards that we want to hold ourselves to. And so, you brought up a good point. Yeah, as the community grows, it taxes the facilities. And before we built even Legacy Park, Morgan Levy was one of those ones that, a small example, we had artificial turf fields that are a part of, that park. Those fields are supposed to last 10 years. They lasted 8 because why? Because they were used so much. And so now, these are things that tax but now we see that with Legacy being built, it relieved the burden on Morgan Levy Park, and it spreads it out because there's a demand. And as we grow as a community, as we grow as a city, there's always going to be a demand on parks because this happens to be what people like in this community: health and quality of life, and that's what we're talking about. So
There is a chart that I would like to show. If you can show that
Yeah, I was
chart.
trying to put it up and I couldn't.
Good.
Yeah,
We have it here.
figure it out.
It's a chart that has all the stats in the city. Do we have a chart on the screen? Yeah. That is very interesting because that shows the usage of the park. Because
Right.
I also, in one of the discussions, people claim that the parks are not being used. No, I went to Legacy and I found it totally full. I wanted, you don't find
Yeah.
room anymore.
I think that the question was whether or not it was our residents that
Yeah,
are
the
using the park.
percentage of residents.
Of our residents who use the parks. I mean, obviously, when you have, we're a city that's surrounded by other municipalities, and so we're close enough to where if you're providing something very special, other people are going to want to come, and we don't close our doors to anybody.
Right.
But I'll tell you that the majority, and I think Barbie can go ahead and give you some statistical information, that the majority of our parks are used, and the benefit comes to our residents, and that's what we strive to do.
So currently we have registered in our software, 95% of the people registered are residents. So, and then we have, and I can't see the chart, but I know that I don't know if it's on the screen right now, and the lights are.
It is there.
Right.
It is there.
Can't see. And then I think it's 75%, and if I'm mistaken, please make sure you look at the chart, don't look at don't say my numbers, are coming to our special events. A lot of people say these events are for the residents. We do surveys at the events. We ask people if they're residents or not. There are many residents here. There's a lot of, also what we've learned through these programs, especially in our tennis program, we ask, how are the participants going? A lot of them, we have a lot of new people coming in from other countries. They're living in the same household as people, so a lot of people are like, well, they don't live here. I'm like, well, no, they live with their aunt, their sister, or their brother, and they're there, and they're part of our community. So they are our residents. The chart also shows the 5 top priorities, which were new additional parks, trails and greenways, indoor recreation centers. The aquatic facility was top 4, social spaces. One of the things we've done is that the green spaces are multi-generational, multi-purpose, and multi-seasonal. Oh, thank you. Appreciate you bringing that up. And as our surveys stated, we are 98% satisfaction rate. The other thing is that we do have volunteers. A lot of the students in the high schools come out and volunteer. They help out with the services. We give them back volunteer hours. We currently have about 707 volunteers. And in hours, they accumulate about 3,500 hours annually. And as you stated, there is research. We did put research on the website that identifies the property value and the research that has done with the economical impact that parks and green spaces do bring to a community. And it also identifies these spaces are well kept, well maintained. That keeps the property value. If they're not maintained, they actually make it worse. But they say it's anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on cost. If you're abutting a park, it's 20%. Property value.
It's very interesting because people sometimes claim we don't want people to come in. Well, that is really absurd. Every city in the world is fighting for people to come in.
Right.
Yeah.
Every city in the world.
Right.
And if people don't come in, our restaurants won't be here.
Right.
Our hotels won't be here.
Right.
Our city won't be here. We all came in one day too, right? And the fact that Doral has such a good reputation helped us in terms of financially. Now, certainly it's nice to go to a restaurant where you only have yourself, the waiters, and the cook, but that, it's going to be a little bit expensive. And nobody would open
you
it,
worry
by the
about
way.
the food quality.
Exactly.
I mean, look, we're a victim of our success.
Mm-hmm.
We have 150, 200,000 people come here every day to do business. And the business community, like you had mentioned, is something, and you mentioned is something that carries some of the burden for the residents. And allows us to keep a millage rate that's low, and the second lowest tax millage rate in the whole entire county. It's because of the business. So we're victims of our own success. We want private communities, we want closed communities. We don't have a grid like in other cities, because we want to have that privacy. That comes at a price, so that puts all the people on the road when they talk about traffic and the reasons why they don't want people to come into the city is because traffic. But what you just said, Mr. Spangaro, is very true. If we have something that attracts people and they're able to come, it helps the other businesses. We had a golf tournament here a while back, and everybody knows that used to bring 100,000 people for 7 days, or 5 days, or 6 days, whatever it was, to come into the city, and that had an impact on the businesses. It had an impact on the hotels. It brought prosperity to the city, and so people coming into our city is not a bad thing. People coming into the city is actually a good thing, and that's what we have to kind of shift that mindset and understand that it's important for people to come into the city.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. Imagine that we don't do the project, and the property values will grow, but won't move as much as we want. So, is this a moment where credit ratings are optimal almost for us? An interest rate, what is your financial view in terms of when to withdraw? Because, sometimes the financing drives the timing.
Sure, that's a very good question. I mean, I think as anyone knows that follows the financial markets at all, we still are at very low rates, historically speaking. The 10-year Treasury just touched, I believe, just over 3.1%. Borrowing rates for the city of Doral, which actually, let me go back for a minute. Someone mentioned the reserves, and you could use that towards the parks. The question is, you absolutely could. However, I would make the point that due to the financial strength of the city, the strong management practices at the city now enjoys a very, very strong credit rating, a AA credit rating from S&P. For those that aren't familiar with the credit rating scale, AAA is the absolute highest that you can get, and there are only a handful of cities in Florida that have a AAA rating. But AA is a very, very strong rating. So the city will have very low cost of capital when they do go to the market, comparatively speaking. And just kind of where we are in the economic cycle and the interest rate cycle, we are at the lower end of that cycle, right? If interest rates continue to creep up over the next 5-10 years from now, we could be looking at a very different interest rate environment than where we are today.
And that is influencing, that means, let me create a scenario. We put $20-30 million in the park, and we only borrow 100. It's going to be even more expensive because our credit rating will go down. Our rates will go up because we don't have any reserves.
Well, reserves are one piece of the credit profile, right? Of course, but they're a very important piece of the credit profile. So it's, in a hypothetical scenario, could you have a negative credit impact from drawing down your reserves? Absolutely, especially given where we live in South Florida. Someone was speaking to the storms earlier. 15% again is the city's practice. It's a very strong practice, but it's good to have a cushion above that, given kind of just where we live in the geography and the magnitude of storms.
And the buyers of these bonds are usually funds that have certain, ratings limitations, right? I mean. Yeah,
that's another very good question. Absolutely. Normally, you get the big investment funds, insurance companies that will be buyers of these bonds in large blocks, and they do have credit minimums that they can buy. So for the most part, kind of the most widespread diversity of buyers you can get, they'll have a minimum of an A rating, let's say.
So I got to go ahead.
No, I've been involved in the bond side of things from a bank side, and there's many things that I think are positive for us, and just looking at Doral, because from a credit standpoint, you look at the city's ability to tax, right? So then you look at what cushion do you have, and looking at the low millage rate that we currently have, that's one of those assessments that they make for the rating to say they've got cushion, quite a bit of cushion.
Things go wrong,
that their ability to tax there is such that this is from a repayment capacity. That's one of those measures. But when you're talking about using reserves, this is not something that would be sustainable over time, and should not. It's a red flag to start using those. So that would be that's one of those things when you're looking at your credit rating.
Right.
But in going through this sort of project, could you get into a little bit about how once we are invested into an approved, vote on November 6th, how is it that the tranches could possibly enter for those different bonds, and would that have an effect on the overall cost if the timing is wrong?
Are you talking about repayment? I'm just trying to.
I'm talking about
The
first the
withdrawal,
draw.
the withdrawal.
First,
draw.
so that everybody can
Or a
understand
few draws.
the use and how
Sure.
they associate, because it's really not, you kind of want to say it's a, like the use of a line of credit. It's really not, because
you're gonna
it's,
use it, yeah.
right. So it's the bond, it's different tranches of the bond, so we know, the characteristics, so we know what we're talking about, if you can get into a little bit of that.
If I could just kind of, again, set the context. So, we have looked at this, and obviously, these are projections. So we look at this, we're going to take three draws over the next 6 years. Each draw 50 million for the next, every 2 years for the next 6 years to make it the 150 if we end up needing that. And so based on that is what we've kind of done our projections, and there's where I'll turn it over.
Yeah,
to
absolutely,
Sergio.
and Mr. Manager, you said it perfectly. I mean, as far as the phasing and sequencing of the bonds, as I think I mentioned earlier, you wouldn't borrow the entire 150, 120, whatever the number, you're not going to borrow the entire amount at once. The last thing you want to do is kind of borrow that money and just sit on the funds while the expenditure schedule is 5, 7 years, 10 years to build out all the projects. So more than likely what would happen is after a approved ballot, there's a documentation process. Say it takes 3 or 4 months to get to the market for the first time with the first bond issue. Depending on the expenditure schedule, which I think by that point, kind of the Parks Department would have a better expenditure schedule, cost estimates. Depending on that, you would borrow a portion of that first initial phase. Right now, we're planning around 50 million. You would borrow that. At the point that we closed on that borrowing, which would be sometime in 2019, you have locked in your cost of capital. So you have secured long-term fixed rate bonds at that point. The rate will not change throughout
For the
that.
full amount.
No, for your
For
first,
that draw.
for
For the
whatever
first
amount
50,
we
for the
issue,
50,
the first
yeah.
50, let's say right
Sure.
now. It would lock in
You're
your cost
locked
of
in.
capital at that point. The rate will not change over time. Oh, and I should also mention that the majority of municipal bonds, if you look back historically, always get refinanced for interest rate savings to a lower interest rate at some point during their life. But we won't even touch on that today. We're really just saying you will lock in the cost of capital at that time. And then as you spend that money down, as we get closer to the next, to having to replenish that construction fund, if you will, we'll issue the second tranche of bonds, kind of on the same schedule. So the other thing we do for the city is monitor the markets. Even if we borrow the first 50 million and the construction fund, let's say it has 20 million left in it, and you're not projected to spend that for the next 6-8 months, we may be in an environment where interest rates are rising, and we would advise the city to borrow the next tranche earlier than they normally would to lock in the cost of capital again. So we think kind of on average, a very safe assumption for an overall interest rate right now is what the calculator that's on the website assumes 4.75%. If you were to ask me if we were to borrow that money today, the rate would probably be closer to 3.75%. So we think on average, given that the borrowing will happen over, say, 3, 4, 5 years, on average, 4.75 is a very conservative estimate.
So I got two little questions. One is, Eddie, what's been our track record for previous projects that we've done based on budget? Like what we've estimated for that project, where we come in.
So, it's funny you should ask that, because right now I'm trying to squeeze in another project that is based on all the savings of all the other projects that I've had.
Okay.
And so we, the track record we've had is we've come in under budget, and we've come in on time, and we've come in with the savings. The projects vary in scope and in magnitude. I haven't really calculated how much, but I can tell you that just overall, that's been the trend.
Yeah.
We've had one project that we're right now still kind of dealing with, which is the Legacy Park. I know I've heard a lot of comments about it.
Yeah.
We're trying to negotiate with the contractor the closing of that project. There's a couple of outstanding items, but the project's still within what we anticipated was the original cost of the project. So I can that project sitting aside, I can tell you right now that with the 107 million that we've spent in the last 4 years, we've come in on time and under budget.
Yeah.
And that's what we expect for any of these projects. Again, the 150 million is an estimate of what we think it would cost to build this all out. Using the trend in mind, it would probably maybe come in a little less. If we want to, enhance some projects and bring in other things that still fall within the realm of what we are allowed to spend this money, we may do it. But if we don't need it, we won't use it. And that's really what we're going to do. We've always been very fiscally responsible about the way we handle all of our projects in the city.
Thanks. And I think that's a concern of project overruns. Everybody's always worried about that.
Yeah.
And then my second part of the question is, so we have the draws, and I don't understand in terms of how does this equate to a resident. So I'm a resident. I vote yes. The city votes yes. We're going to get a beautiful park. We go 2019. The bond is issued. When do I start paying for this? And if I do, is it in percentages depending on the draw? Is it all? How does that work? What am I going to get hit with and for how long?
What you'll be paying is really when we're making our debt payments annually, just enough to cover that payment. That's what you're going to be assessed separately. You'll continue to pay, currently now is 1.9, the millage rate, and we'll have a separate millage rate for the debt, but only to cover that debt payment for the year.
So
So it'll
making
be
an
Make it
assumption,
simple. If we borrow
let's make it
50
simple.
million in June 1st,
Yeah.
July 1st,
which is a third of the calculated number.
we withdraw 50 million, let's say it's 4%,
Mm-hmm.
4% is 2 million, right?
Yeah.
2
So
million.
50,
Probably
yeah,
that,
so-
it would be like we're saying 3 million would be our debt
So-
payment on the first
You will be
50.
paying the installment based on a mortgage of 50 million at 4% in 30 years.
Sure, but the bank always gets their interest first. So if we're looking at, let's say our calculator, you go into the calculator and the calculator says you're going to be paying $165. Am I going to be looking at really a third of that
Yes.
that I'll be paying
Yes.
at
More or
least
less.
until the next
Correct.
draw comes out?
Exactly.
So
Right,
for the
so
first few years, I might just see $50.
Right.
Correct.
Then I'm
If
gonna
you do
buy
it
it.
in
Correct.
3 tranches, you will pay 1/3, 2/3, 3/3.
Right.
Exactly. Okay.
Right, and therein lies what I started, I kind of laid it out. I mean, we're looking at the first 12, 18, 24 months projects in design. Each one of the issues each one of the categories of where we're putting this money is looking as one project. And so, you're in design, so the costs are going to be very minimal. Then we start getting shovels in the ground, after 24 months, and then so that's where the project accelerates. So we just came up with just a number, because we can't predict that
Sure.
until we are there. So we said a conservative kind of look at this is the first 2 years 50 million, the second 2 years 50 million, the third 2 years. So within 6 years you have the full 150, if it's even that, and then from there we're able to kind of make it more predictable. And again, it's a very conservative estimate, and based on that, based on the interest, I mean, I think we have a graph that we have put on the website
It's on the
that'll
website.
kind of show you how you it's a
ramping
step.
up.
You start ramping up,
Yeah.
it levels off, and then it starts to ramp down.
When you
And
start
so, and you'll be able to understand that. And that even that graph still, I don't think has taken into consideration
Offset.
the offset that's going to come from the development and
And the
from the other
residents.
contributions that have come as the city builds out all the properties that have been already vetted and entitled for development for the next 5 years. So, that graph may change as we move forward, so we can get a better financial picture. But what you're seeing now is basically, a very conservative look and kind of the worst case scenario, if you want to say.
Now, money is usually in today's world not the major issue for, a double A rating and everything else. The question is management.
Right.
You manage a $70 million budget every year.
Right.
More or less. And this is a $150 million project.
Right.
What is usually sometimes you want to do so many things, but you can only manage up to. How do you feel about the management of the project going forward?
So I'll go ahead.
This is a big
and
challenge.
I'll take that one. I'll take
We
that
all
one.
do a small construction and we know
Right.
what it is.
Right. So I mentioned earlier that I'm going to say it. I'm a builder. I'm an architect. This is what I do. I don't build buildings. I build a city. And I am a person. I'm a decision maker for all the people who are contributing to the development and the future of this city. And in the last 4.5 years since I've been a manager, like I said earlier, we as a city have built $107 million worth of projects. and they've come in on time. They've been successful projects. They've been a diverse portfolio of projects. Right now in the hopper we have $30 million worth of projects. I have 15 million that are ready just in permitting stage, and plus 5 million in design, and another 11 million that are just kind of waiting to happen. That this is what we do. This is what we do. We're not a construction company, so we have to provide other services. So for this in particular, we have to put together a team of people. It's not going to be, it's not going to be, we can't pull from our regular services because we have an obligation for the regular services that we provide. So financially, from a financial perspective, Maddie and I have worked together to see what are some of the needs that we're going to need, and those needs are going to change as we start to draw that money, as those projects start. So we've already prepared for the first year just in case within the budget that we have right now. And so I understand as a manager and as a person who knows the building industry, I know that for this I need a separate team of experts that are going to supplement and complement the team that we have in place right now for this. And so that's the strategy right now. So we're ready, we understand, and what we're waiting to see is what's going to happen on November 6th. Are we going to have to do this, or are we not going to do this? And so from a perspective of a manager, I understand that it's a challenge, and I think that with the team that we have in place, we're prepared fundamentally for it. But I know that as a person who knows this business, I need to enhance that and bring in people that are dedicated and focused on just dealing with this obligation and this commitment that we're making to the community.
Why don't we go to we are running over time, and we want to thank also TV and Radio Miami, who is in Doral.
Okay.
Yes.
And we are in Doral, and thank you very much. But any other questions before we adjourn?
No, thank you
I think
so
this
much.
was good. I think we answered a lot of the key questions. I think ultimately this is an amazing thing for our city, and it's going to put us over the top. So I know selfishly I won't be able to use it as much, but I know our kids will. And,
Oh, you
I
will
mean,
be using it.
Yeah, I will. I'll be
It's for
doing some
everybody.
exercise and
Oh.
lose a little weight.
I want to use at least a couple of minutes if we can, because we only talk about Doral Park, but there is another set of projects. They have the
Absolutely.
cultural center.
Yeah, we have the cultural pavilion, which is about 90,000 square feet of space that have art space, multi-purpose space, the restrooms at downtown Doral Park. There'll be enhancements to other parks, such as Trails and Tails will get lighting. So currently, right now, there's no lighting. And now with the sun setting earlier, people still want to take out their dog when it's dark out there. The trail system will be expanded and enhanced. We'll add lighting to the trail system, which is also really important. Not only, as the manager stated, it's not just the parks, but there's also security. Lighting does deter bad activity happening. That's part of it. Security cameras, additional security cameras at Morgan Levy Park. Doral Meadow, we would be fixing up that building so that we can have programming there. So the idea, one of the initiatives that is citywide, along with state and nationwide, is having a park in walking distance of your home, and that you can do majority of the programs at that facility. So Doral Meadow, we can expand the building and have maybe Zumba or art classes or things of that nature for the people in that area. So those are other projects that are included. The only other thing I wanted to say is that if people have questions, all we ask is for you to be informed, to get the right information. If you
Right.
have some doubt or something in your mind that's you're on the fence about, email us. You can email us at Doral. The email is doralparksbond@cityofdoral.com. Or you can find the email on the website, which is www.doralparksbond.org. We have our emails. All of our emails are on the City of Doral website. You can find us there at www.cityofdoral.com. It is very simple. I'll give you my cell phone number, just because we want to make sure you're informed. We're here to provide the information. We're not here to advocate. We want people to make a sound decision based on their household, on projects, on this bond. So that's all I ask is for you to be well informed.
Right. And if I can add to that, we have we said earlier, it's November 6th is when the voting is going to take place. It's a ballot that is loaded with a lot of information,
Great point.
a lot of things, constitutional amendments. There's a lot of things going on. If you look on the ballot, 375, 374, it's a yes or no. We encourage you to go and look and see and get informed. Like Barbie said, we're open to questions. We have on our I believe on our website we have the calendar of the events that we have scheduled. We're looking to be doing these type workshops and outreach, all the way up until the day of the election. Financial questions again, to Maddie. I'd like to thank Sergio for coming from PFM, who's our consultant and have been a great partner with the city for many years and many different capacities, in the financial world for the city. And I thank him for coming here tonight. But we have, we may not have all the answers, but we'll find them. But I think that from a broad perspective, I think that this is something that we have looked at from many different different vantage points, and I think that we do have the information to educate the public and give them the tools that they need to make the very best decision that they can for themselves and for the community as a whole.
Thank you.
On that note, Eddie, I'm sorry, would additional information start to be posted out on the financial side?
We have
for
facts
them?
and questions. We have we're putting in as we develop some of so we understand this more as we sit in these kind of scenarios where people are asking questions, and what are the questions that they're asking, and as we're taking that information in and we're trying to put that and digest that and put it out in a way that's understandable for everybody. And financials are something that is very complicated. Like some of the conversation that you guys are having are very, very specific, and not everybody understands it at that level. But we do have more and more information that we continue to build the website with information from all points of view, from financial to just general questions that people have with regards to the projects.
And there's more workshops that are scheduled and slated
Absolutely.
to be coming out.
Absolutely.
We actually have, just so that, to what your question is, we have one next Thursday at 7 p.m. at the police substation.
Okay.
That's the next
on
one.
97.
Yes.
Yes.
Down the block literally.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
So.
we really appreciate the time. We in the coalition, we make a petition a few years ago to accelerate Doral legacy because we thought the council was sleeping on it. And so we are very, very much into the parks and the evolution of the city based on what we have researched. I was personally reading today a lot of material produced in North America, specifically also in Australia, and the influence of parks. I had to confess that I was totally ignorant about what it means. We should think about it. We should think about it. We are sitting in Doral today, enjoying a great city that was thought 15 or 20 years ago. We are not making a decision on November on what we're going to see in June next year. We're making a decision on what people are going to be seeing in 2030. Think about it. It's our obligation to our children, to our grandchildren, and next generations. Think about it. Thank you very much. Thank you to the
Thank
city.
you.
Thank you for all the work.
Thank you
We
for
really
having us.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
we really
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, all of you, for having it. Thank you for being involved, and thank you.
Good night.